Today I'm reading the very last part of Moses' farewell address to the people, the sons of Israel, as they are about to cross the Jordan into the Promised Land. And of course we know Moses was not going with them. Deuteronomy 30:15 through 20. I have set before you today life and prosperity, death and adversary. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God, walking in his ways, observing his commandments, decrees, and ordinances, then you shall live and become numerous, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are now entering. But if your heart turns away, you don't hear, but are led astray down by other gods, then you shall perish. I declare to you today, you will perish. You shall not live long in the land that you are crossing in. I call heaven and earth to be witnesses against you today, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curses. Choose your life so that you and your descendants may live, loving the Lord, obeying him, holding fast to him. For that means life to you and to your future generations, lengths of days, so that you may live in the land that the Lord swore to give you, to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. The second reading is from Corinthians. This is Paul in his frustrations. He's been there 18 months trying to teach the people about Christ. 1 Corinthians 3:1 through 9. And so, brothers and sisters, I could not speak to you as spiritual people, but as people of the flesh, as infants in Christ. I fed you with milk, not solid food, for you were not ready for solid food. Even now, you still are not ready. You're not ready for solid food. Even now, you aren't ready. For as long as there is jealousy and quarreling among you, are you not of the flesh, behaving according to human inclinations? For when one person says, I belong to Paul, or I belong to Apollos, are you not merely human? What then is Apollos? What is Paul? We are servants. We are servants whom you came to believe in, as the Lord assigned to each. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything. Only God who causes the growth. The one who plants, the one who waters, has a common purpose, and each will receive wages according to the labor of each. For we are God's servants, working together. You are God's field, God's building.
From the Gospel according to Matthew in the 5th chapter, as he continues with a portion of the Sermon on the Mount. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It's no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a bushel basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Do not think I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. May God add his blessing to his holy word. I read a story about a pilot who flew DC-10s from St. Louis to the East Coast. And he always flew pretty much the same route, with the same schedule, and there were certain business people who took these same flights on a regular basis. Well, certainly they weren't becoming friends. He recognized them enough to exchange greetings as they came on and off the plane. And one of these frequent travelers was a visually impaired man who used a guide dog. One occasion, the flight was going to be delayed so that it was decided to let the passengers back off the plane so they could wait in the terminal while some repairs were done. As the pilot was exiting, he noticed that this visually impaired fellow and his dog were still sitting there. And he asked if there was anything he could do. Well, the man said, I think I'm just going to sit right here. But it'd be great if you could give Buster a little walk. So he did. And he never forgot the stares of the folks in the terminal as he took a walk in his pilot's uniform, wearing his pilot's sunglasses, apparently being led by a guide dog. I think we would all agree that would give us quite a pause. I hope it doesn't sound small-minded, but even with the great technological advances in guiding aircraft, I probably wouldn't want to be a passenger on that plane. Much as everyone's mother might tell them not to judge a book by the cover, some things just don't look right. They can be upsetting. Well, Paul is telling us some things in 1 Corinthians that we don't really want to think about. Or we just want to think it's some church history from 2,000 years ago. Yes, it's history. But Paul is holding it up to us today as an example of what can happen in today's church. First, I want to mention a couple of translation issues in this passage. Because in our English, we don't always make exact translations of the Greek. In our translation, he uses the word flesh a couple of times in this passage. But in the original Greek, it's two different words. And the way it is with English, we assign different meanings to the same word. They both translate to us as flesh. The first meaning, made of flesh. He was speaking to people as a human being, who were human beings, made of flesh. Real people, speaking to them as people. In the second case, he speaks of people being dominated by the flesh. In other words, being dominated by their human concerns. So he effectively is calling them big babies here, saying that they weren't ready to eat solid food. They needed the spiritual milk so that they could grow. He wants them to grow up. He wants them to become, in effect, adult Christians. Some question that when he's saying some of them belong to Apollos, would they claim to belong to Apollos, some of them belong to Paul, some of them belong to different teachers. And he's saying here that they aren't truly Christians, but that's not what he means. He's saying that they're Christians, but they're still concentrating on the beginning of their faith journey, not the completion, not where they should be in this journey. And because our goal as Christians is to be Christ-like. In our gospel today, we have a small piece of his Sermon on the Mount. And this sermon is sometimes really hard for us to deal with, because we break it down into pieces. And we never really grasp the entirety of the whole thing at once. In today's piece, we have several parts that are hard to harmonize. He talks about letting our light shine and being examples to the world. He talks about us being salt, which is a necessary leaven into the earth. But at the same time, that if we let our salt lose its saltiness, we can't get it back. He talks about the commandments. But in other parts of the same sermon, he expands on these commandments and says that we have to do more than the commandments say. In Deuteronomy, Moses is telling us that God will bless those that follow his commandments and curse those who don't. It brings the difference in life and death. But Jesus expands on these commandments. But then later he condenses them back down into only two. Love God with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Get confusing, can it? Take spiritual maturity. That's what Paul is getting at in his letter to the Corinthians here. Babies drink milk morning, noon, night, even all night sometimes it seems like. We need to get beyond the spiritual milk so we can subsist on the spiritual meat. The things that Jesus really is trying to get across to us. But how does Paul know where the Corinthians are in their spiritual growth? How do we know where we are in our spiritual growth? Well, God examines our behavior as an indicator of our spiritual condition, not our knowledge. And that's what Paul is getting at in this letter. When we take the earlier part of the letter that we've heard in the last couple of weeks, where he's talking about some of the things that were going on in the Corinthian church. We must not imagine that we're maturing simply because we're learning about God and we're learning about the Bible. Because our maturity is measured not only by what we know, but what we actually put into practice. When we read or hear God's word, we must not be satisfied simply to understand its content. Say, yes, I know what that means. I mean, we see in James where he talks about being doers of the word, not just hearers. And it's the same thing here in Paul. And that's important that we do hear the word, that we read the word, that we understand the word. But that's not the end of our spiritual growth. It's only the beginning. We must move on to ask ourselves, what am I doing? Am I doing what God's word says to do? In my home, in my work, at school, in the neighborhood where I live? If the word of God is only educating you, you're not growing spiritually. Because spiritual growth comes when we're transformed by God's word. When we depart from our sin, when we live as Christ has called us to live. One way for me to see where I need to grow spiritually is when I confess my sins. You know, our time of confession and worship is something that we all need, and I need it as well. I don't naturally take enough special time to confess sins. When we do that, when we truly put our finger on the ways we're following our own selfish and sinful desires and following sinful practices, we see where we need to depart from this sin. and grow into the glorious image that Lord Jesus Christ has for us. The Christian growth is about getting bigger. It's becoming more like Christ in our character, when our character changes. And we need to remember what the attitudes and actions that we need to depart from in order to grow and to live as Christ. And we need to examine ourselves continually. We do it on Communion Sundays, but we need to do it all the time. And examine not just what we do, it's even more important to examine our thoughts. Do we love God with all of our mind? Do we love God with all of our strength, with all of our soul? Do we truly love our neighbors as much as we love ourselves? Or are we still spiritual babies, taking in the milk and hearing the word, but not growing? Or are we becoming spiritual adults? Are we controlled by the flesh? Or are we controlled by the Spirit? Because Paul told the Corinthians, for when you say, I belong to Paul, and another one says, I belong to Apollos, you're being merely human. Not saying they aren't Christian, but he's saying they're not quite there yet. In the same way, consider when we say, I belong to UMC, or I belong to WCA, or I belong to this group, or I belong to that group, are we not also being human in our thoughts? Let's all say, I belong to Jesus Christ, and I'm at work in His mission, in this world, regardless of where I am or who I'm with. I'm